This is the item on the Times newspaper, page 5 of today, Wednesday, 24th of March 2021. Now, this is a piece that is not surprising in terms of the evidence that we have been relying on and we have been coming across and have been assessing for decades about the corrupt bureaucracy called the British judiciary. But this one is significant because one of the two so-called top judges mentioned in the case by another licensed law trader called Mark Beaumont, 58, refers to Brian Levison. Of course, Levison in this piece is not mentioned or named as Brian Levison. He is mentioned as Sir Brian Levison, then president of the Queen's Bench Division. Now, Levison became known in connection with the inquiry called the Levison Inquiry that was actually mainly held during the 2011 in London. And the inquiry was held following sort of unusual outcry about Fleet Street newspapers, especially Rupert Murdoch ones and the others, spying on people and hacking people's telephones and messages. And this was actually linked with the murder of a young teenage girl, murder and rape, I think. So the outcry was emotionally charged because of the child, this girl being murdered and raped and violated by a person that was later connected with the Murdoch newspapers, abusing her telephone. And so the outcry was emotionally charged, and it was kind of conducted in a bureaucratic way with literally dozens, if not more, of witnesses being called and examined before Brian Levison. Now, at that time, Levison was not the president of the Queen's Bench Division in the High Court. That was prior to his becoming president of the Queen's Bench Division. He was some kind of other judicial post holder when David Cameron announced that he, Brian Levison, would chair the inquiry. So therefore it was known as the Levison Inquiry. And this item about a barrister who was blackballed by Levison and another one, that other one is currently the Lord Chief Justice of England. Now the other man, the complainant, Beaumont, according to this piece by Dominic Kennedy, investigative editor in the Times, is known as the barrister's barrister and is known as a thorn in the side of the legal establishment in Britain. He represents advocates brought before their disciplinary body for alleged misconduct, which often pits him against the institutions of his profession, that is the licensed law trading profession. When Beaumont, applied for silk, that is to be able to get the tag called QC or Queen's Counsel added to his name. When he applied in 2016 for the tag, Barnett, who is the Lord Chief Justice now, as a today's date, 24th of March 2021. Barnett, then a Court of Appeal judge, wrote to the Queen's Counsel Appointment Panel, making disparaging remarks about his handling of a case before the High Court. His meaning Beaumont's handling of a case. The Queen's Counsel Appointments Panel informed Beaumont that it considered that Barnett had properly raised the issue, but that he had not shown the candidate lacked integrity, which is the only grounds on which judges may raise concerns. But the Queen's Counsel Appointments Panel nonetheless rejected Beaumont's application to be allowed to be made a QC. Although Queen's Counsel Appointments Panel told Beaumont that no other judge has raised concerns, Beaumont later learned that Levison, now Investigatory Powers Commissioner, had sent a damaging letter in 2016. In it, Levison suggested the panel contact Barnett. Levison claimed he was aware of other judges who may have views and offered to discuss matters further. 2 years later, Beaumont applied to be QC again and was unsuccessful. He appealed to the Queen's Counsel Complaints Committee, which held a 6-month investigation, concluding the QCA had shown apparent bias. Now, the Labour member of the House of Peers, Lord Handy, QC, who represented Beaumont, called on Robert Buckland, the Lord Chancellor, to investigate why the application was treated in an apparently biased way. Handy said it smacks of the sort of blackballing system of the past. Now, the inquiry discovered that 2 QCA officers who were aware of the judge's damaging letters should not have been involved with Beaumont's second application. One of them, Sir Alex Allen, in his role as the chairman of the selection panel, signed correspondence with Beaumont. The QCA stated that Allen had recused himself and took no part in decision-making, adding that it had merely appended the electronic signature to a letter. The inquiry also found that the QCA chief executive, Russell Wallman, removed referee's assessment of Beaumont before it was seen by the panel. The QC, now this is a list of lies by these judges and the QCs and the bureaucrats. Can you believe this? This is a list of lies by these people. So, let's see where it concludes. Now, the QCA, that is Queen's Counsel Appointments Panel, rejected the findings of the inquiry. So this is the inquiry into the behavior of 2 judges and several QCs and several officials involved in the Queen's Council Appointments Committee panel. And this is the tip of the iceberg. As we have been saying regularly, almost every day, the English judicial bureaucracy is a corrupt bureaucracy, unfit for purpose. And if the judicial bureaucracy is corrupt, then it follows that there is no due process, there is no rule of law, and there is no access to due process and remedy duly arrived at by the people. So we are going back to update on this one. The name of Esma Bengapsia, which is the first one on the banner that is just underneath the speaker's presenter's face, just before Shamima Begum. Esma Bengapsia is a Muslim woman born and brought up in the USA. And she probably is only a few years older than Shamima Begum. She is a USA citizen by birth, just like Shamima Begum is a citizen by birth of the UK. And we're saying that she is. We are not saying she was, because we believe that Shamima Begum has been the victim of an additional racist discrimination flouting international law by the UK. So we said that she's in the present tense. She's a British citizen by birth. And we shall come to Esma Bengapsia's case. But before we go away from that one, we say that the chief executive of the White Rocks, also known as Black Rock, the Black Rock, the White Rock is because of the notoriety BlackRock has achieved in the last few weeks after Esma Bengapsia took the lead role in publishing a list of allegations against the racists controlling the BlackRock. And those who are aware of more information about BlackRock than ordinary people observing this have taken the initiative and renamed BlackRock as White Rock. Now, the similarities are, of course, central similarities between the treatment by Sajid Javid, acting as a stooge Home Secretary in the name of the racist regime in the UK. Javid acted as a coconut, and he removed Shamima Begum's citizenship. And in doing so, he played to the gallery of racists all across the country, including in the conservative kind of regime. Now, 2 years later, the woman who got in post at the Home Office, same post that Sajid Javid had held when he robbed Shamima Begum of her British citizenship by birth. She, that is Priti Patel, authorized the appeal to go ahead against Shamima Begum's application to the court that she should be allowed to return to the UK to fully pursue her challenge against the Home Office, removing her British citizenship by birth. Now, that application by Shamima Begum was granted by the Court of Appeal. So the Home Office appealed against the Court of Appeal, granting Shamima Begum that particular permission. And so the appeal by the Home Office against the Court of Appeal ruling in favor of Shamima Begum was rubber stamped as a rejection. That is to say, the Supreme Court rejected that Court of Appeal ruling and approved the appeal, allowed the appeal by the Home Secretary and the Home Office against the Court of Appeal. This is where we are in terms of the procedural steps that have been so far taken. And that ruling by the Supreme Court was a rubber stamping ruling. It wasn't an independent judicial kind of ruling. It was a completely rubber stamp abuse of the Supreme Court by the bunch of racists that sat there to give the appearance of legitimacy and legality to the racist act of violating Shamima Begum's legal constitutional rights. And as the video shows, and as the transcript shows, the man who was filmed reading the rubber stamping Supreme Court collusion with the Home Office, called Reed, R-E-E-D, and the contents of the 48 pages ruling that we have seen do not neither read nor the contents of the so-called allegedly collectively reached rubber stamping decision against Shamima Begum. They don't read like a legal document. They don't read or sound, when Reed read them, like a legal decision whatsoever. And similarly, we go back and across the so-called Atlantic and look at the kind of stupidity by White Rock. Their chief executive, Larry Fink, has issued a stupid series of words in a bid to kind of deny that White Rock is racist, has been racist or anti-Muslim. The statement, as published by the mainstream media in Britain and also in the USA, ascribing to Larry Fink the view that he was shocked at the revelation that White Rock was racist, etc., etc. Now, this promotion was spewed along with the announcement that White Rock has appointed a leading American law firm to investigate the allegations. This is so stupid, it is beyond condemnation. Because the operation of White Rock as a racist entity in the mainstream and the finance field is not only new, but it has been a central. Racism is and had been a central weapon in the armory of the capitalist corruption called White Rock. Over, let's say the last 10 years, BlackRock, White Rock, has been the central part or a central part of the American and the British and the French and other Western financial plot and agenda to loot Arabian countries of trillions of equivalents of the trillions of dollars. And they have been doing that with wanton brazenness and lack of remorse lack of any awareness, any care about the fact that they have been robbing the Arabian countries of trillions of dollars for the benefit of the racists in the USA and in Western Europe, including in the UK. So, Larry Fink is an offender by his now guilty of aggravated offense, saying that he didn't know that this was going on. And secondly, that is the racism and the discrimination that Asma Bengapsia has brought out into the open. And Larry Fink's suggestion that otherwise, without Asma Bengapsia's disclosures and revelations, an open letter to him, there would have been no racism at all. That is so brazenly stupid and ignorant and idiotic that we don't have to elaborate on how stupid and idiotic and ignorant that is. And then this appointment of the senior law firm. I mean, what a joke. There is no law firm, senior or junior or whatever, that will find racists as racists or anti-Muslims, guilty of anti-Muslim hatred. And this firm is not going to do anything different from what the absolutely thousands of law firms in the USA routinely do, deny racism. So we shall be talking more about that by citing particular episodes of the propaganda series that White Rocks has unleashed. And we shall also take a look at the contents of the later items in the Financial Times, online and in print editions, because we have got the Financial Times today, and we shall check again for any reference to the allegations by Asma Bengapsia in today's edition. There were yesterday, but today's edition we haven't checked thoroughly yet. We shall do that, and we shall update the commentary and the diagnosis. Going back to Brian Levison, Levison was president of one of the High Court divisions that is called the Divisional Court, Queen's Bench Division. And Queen's Bench Division is the biggest division. Of the High Court, because it contains so many branches. Most of the branches attract the largest number of the litigation that the Queen's Bench Division allows. Now, as the evidence shows, the Queen's Bench Division is part of the racist, corrupt bureaucracy of the entire court system in the UK, in England. And it has, among the administrative staff, the typical numbers of racists and liars, whose job it is to obstruct and block, undermine, delay, divert, and defeat perfectly legitimate applications for various remedies that formally exist and are available through the Queen's Bench Division. Now, the process of going through a litigation on one single matter is itself time-consuming, and the serious litigants can expect to spend anything between an average of 1 year to any number of years in pursuing the litigation. And the state of denial in the minds of the likes of Brian Levison who has been president of the Queen's Bench Division. He's not now, but he has been. The attitude, the evidence of the attitude of Brian Levison is in keeping with the tradition of lying and denial and obstruction and dishonesty by the rest of the judicial bureaucracy in the High Court of Justice and in the entirety of the judicial bureaucracy, including the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, the Criminal Division, the Court of Appeal, Civil Division, and other parts of the overall English judiciary. So as the report about this barrister Muldoon Beaumont in the Times shows, serial liars have been involved in the denial of the QC to this man Mark Beaumont. And the latest one, which is in the paper today, in the report in the paper Times today on page 5 of the Times, Wednesday, the 24th of March, 2021, shows the establishment, the Queen's Counsel Appointments Panel, rejected the inquiry findings, saying that it was satisfied that all applicants have been treated fairly. Now, fair treatment is anathema to the judicial bureaucracy. So what they do, when they pass certain decision, certain action as having been fair, what they are saying is that they're going through the motion. Fairness is not recognized. And it's not recognized, it's not only not recognized within the judicial bureaucracy, but also within the so-called professional membership bodies like the Bar Council. Now, the Bar Council is made up of members, the 4 Inns of Court: Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Inner Temple, and Middle Temple. All 4 of them combined produce the kind of licenses and registrations as practicing law traders, barristers. And the barristers are the one most frequently, overall, the barristers are the ones who are allowed to make an application to become QCs. The Q in the QCs is Queen's, that is Queen apostrophe and S, Queen's, that is Brenda's counsel, that is lawyer, advocate. So it's the kind of lawyers who notionally represent and advocate case or cases on behalf or and on the authority, on the authorization of the Queen. When the monarch is a male, which was the case in the early parts of the last century, the QC was KC, King's Counsel. And if after Brenda, the monarch is still around, and the monarch is occupied by a male, then the QC will become KC immediately. But with Mark Beaumont's applications, of course, he has not been allowed to become a QC even. And what we are waiting for is a kind of exact copy of the findings of the inquiry. It will not be new, it will not be news, but it will have factual, accurate kind of quotations that we can cite. We have already covered the criminality and the dishonesty and the corruption daily operated by and practiced by the legal judiciary, or the judiciary, the corrupt judiciary in England. Although notionally, the Supreme Court is also the Supreme Court for Scotland, for England, for Northern Ireland, and for Cornwall, the Supreme Court hardly does justice to the causes of Scotland or the causes of the Scottish people. And we go back to this grotesque celebration that the Fleet Street corrupt newspapers are corruptly running 126,000 bells. Now, the bells tolled for these lives that had been, if you like, lost because of the incompetence, lack of care, and the cruelty, and a criminally negligent policy adopted by the Johnson-fronted cabal. More than a year ago, they did this to mark the formal announcement of the appearance of COVID-19 in the UK on the 24th of March 2020. The essential decision that was made by Boris Johnson, aided and abetted and controlled by Dominic Cummings and others of his far-right tendencies and orientations. The first kind of policy decision that they made was to let as many people get infected as possible. And that, they said, was the main kind of foundation on which herd immunity would be established. So they decided to kill as many people as possible by allowing them to get infected. And they mistakenly, wrongly, fatally wrongly, and negligently claimed that once herd immunity was established, then the virus would be defeated. Of course, it wasn't defeated. It was allowed to spread to thousands of people that would have otherwise been alive. And that is to do with the policy that Boris Johnson adopted in the knowledge that people would be killed. And it was a part of the herd immunity policy that Johnson et al. Were promoting a year ago. So how dare they say that they're ringing the bells for the victims of their policy? So it's like the Nazis, well, it's like the massacreists or genocidists holding a so-called vigil or anniversary event for the victims of their massacre, their genocide. That is how bad it is. And so what we are saying is that the Daily Mail today, saying this grotesque, corrupt thing on the front page, saying that Boris Johnson has said that he will be haunted by this for as long as he lives. Now, Johnson is not being haunted by this for as long as he lives or as long as he will live. This is a PR stunt being flaunted by the Daily Mail, and the similar kind of thing is being repeated by the corrupt scum owned by the dirty digger Murdoch. And the scum is promoting this lying Boris Johnson kind of image as the savior. I mean, that's the scum's two-page spread, and in there they say that in the bottom it says that this will remain with him for as long as he's alive. The pandemic will stay with me for as long as I live. Now that's a lie. It's a wrong promotion. He didn't lose any relations. So, I mean, the people who could have been saved were allowed to be lost and allowed by his government to lose their lives. How does it feel for the people who have been caused losses of their relations? And we come back to that later again after we discuss the similarity between the cases. Similarity between the treatment of Shamima Begum by the UK Home Office and the treatment of Esma Bengapsia by White Rocks. Now, in the Financial Times yesterday, they ran the story about the treatment of Bengapsia and other people that joined her later. One of the people who joined her is a Kenyan who is a former BlackRock employee who had also written about his experience at the company on Medium, sent their open letter to Fink. Medium is a kind of website. Fink is the Larry Fink they're referring to. This is the face of the complacent racist Fink. Now, the similarity between the treatment of Esma Bengapsia by the White Rock and the treatment of Shamima Begum by the UK Home Secretary Sajid Javid is racist, is the racist denial of equal treatment. Of course, there are many layers and many layers of the experience of both young women. Both of them are Muslim. And both Esma Bengapsia and Shamima Begum are born citizens of their countries. Esma Bengapsia is a US citizen by birth, and Shamima Begum is a British citizen by birth. And both of them are born into families that came from other countries, but they were born in these two countries and acquired automatically, naturally, the right to be citizens of their countries by birth. Now, what Esma Bengapsia has been kind of through has been less, superficially less, or apparently less kind of obvious, because she has been targeted for racist harassment, sexist harassment by co-workers. One of the co-workers, she says, was loudly consulting his co-workers as to whether he would get away if he actually sexually assaulted her. Now that's the brazen confidence on the part of a sexist and a racist and an anti-Muslim, because of her niqab, she has been targeted for ridicule and mocking by apparently Christian co-workers who mocked her and insulted her, not for wearing a Christian Christmas whatever gear. Now that's religious persecution, because this young person was also at the same time, or about the same time, targeted, for sound, noise, mocking noise and sound, harassing her. And she also noticed this co-worker kind of targeting her visually, looking at her as a sexual kind of harassment object or so on. And the fact that the company, instead of apologizing, instead of admitting all the allegations, is now looking for a diversion and a denial, which is bound to be the route they're taking to deny the substantive allegations and claims by Asma Bengapsia. That is why they have hired the so-called top American law firm. Anyone who knows about law firms will know that they have nothing to do with universal legal rights. They are a law firm, they're a business. So we come back to Shamima Begum's treatment by Town Council. One of the people who claims to have sympathy for Shamima Begum and the other schoolgirls, and this person who says that they have sympathy, is a member of the Labour Party, active member of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, and also is claiming that they are campaigning for an end to the elected mayor system. So this person, while claiming to be campaigning for an end to the mayor system, is also claiming the Tower Hamlets Council and John Biggs have not done anything wrong against Shamima Begum. Think about this. If this person wants to challenge what I have just said, they know how to contact us because they have been in contact with us. So let them set out the terms and the facts and the chapter and verse, substantiating any claim that what we are saying is not true. And let them tell this. We don't say anything that is not true. We only operate this channel and all the activities of the campaign in order to tell the truth and to tell off liars and fakers and other assorted activists, self-serving careerists, opportunists, traitors, betrayers, etc. These children, Shamima Begum and her three friends, they were children. They were children, let's say up to 2 years ago, when they crossed from 19 to 20 years. So there were children for all of the years that Lutfur Rahman was in post as the incumbent elected mayor in post at the expense of Taramla's population. So Lutfur Rahman was in post until 23rd of October 2015 when Richard Mori, the election commissioner, kicked Lutfur Rahman out of that post. So Lutfur Rahman, let's take Lutfur Rahman first. Lutfur Rahman, as the incumbent executive mayor, remember the word executive, had the duty, as the council did have the duty, to safeguard these children. Shamima Begum, Sharmina Begum, Amira Abbasi, and the fourth girl, who were known to be children, who were known to be from Tar Hamlets, who were known to be in trouble, who were known to be in trouble in a place that was physically and in many other ways far away from home and beyond the ordinary contact by their families, by their parents, by anybody else that would have been concerned for their welfare. So that was an emergency for each one of these girls. What did Lutfur Rahman do? What did the executive mayor in post at the time do to safeguard these children during those periods? The question is legal, the question is lawful, the question is humanitarian, the question is absolutely urgent, because the council, as within quote, in terms of executive powers and decision making, as in that way represented by the incumbency in that post of executive mayor by Lutfur Rahman, that council owed the duty to help and safeguard these children. And by that council is meant Lutfur Rahman himself in that post. Lutfur Rahman never ceased for a moment to be incumbent in that post from the day he got, quote, elected in October 2010 until the minute he was physically ousted from Tar Hamlets Council on the 23rd of April 2015. So he didn't cease to be incumbent. He never lost any claim to make decisions on behalf of Tar Hamlets Council at any time during those years. So why didn't Lutfur Rahman take any action to safeguard these children? And if he did take any action, if anyone watching this or viewing this is of the view that Lutfur Rahman did take action to safeguard these children, these four Tar Hamlet schoolgirls, then let them assert the evidence. Let them show the evidence. Let them substantiate, describe, and detail the evidence by chapter and verse, by date, time, event, and the person or personnel that must have been involved in doing the safeguarding work. Who are the people? Who were the people that took any action to safeguard these four schoolgirls at any time from the time of the knowledge, let's say public knowledge? Remember, the public knowledge, as far as our campaign is concerned, the public knowledge became real only when these three girls, Shamima Begum and the other two, were publicly mentioned and featured in the news bulletins in the mainstream in England sometime in February 2015. We didn't know about them until that time. So we didn't know because we had no duties whatsoever to them. But Tower Hamlets Council did. Tower Hamlets Council and Lutfur Rahman did have clear duties to safeguard these children throughout the period, including the duty to ensure that the Tower Hamlets Council had carried out comprehensive, complete, and effective investigation into the behavior of all the other parties in between. Remember what we are saying? All the other parties, including the parties that by all cross-referenced kind of sourcing Lutfur Rahman was aware of and most likely was in contact with many of them. Did Lutfur Rahman neglect his duties and stage serial denials about his duties or the extent of his duties, about the safeguarding duties that he owed as the executive mayor, he owed to these schoolgirls? And by definition, by extension, by extrapolation, did Lutfur Rahman collude, cooperate, conspire along with any number of people who would then aid and abet the formation or formulation of a scenario that would then paint Lutfur Rahman and the council under his executive mayor post as being innocent? What were they? Who were they? Who were the people, personnel that Lutfur Rahman actually worked with in order to deny the duties owed to Shamima Begum and the other three girls as they were children, when they were children, as they were detained, when they were detained, as they were kept unable to move freely back home by party or parties that had been responsible and active for their detention. What legal, lawful actions did Tower Hamlets Council take on the knowledge or on the kind of publication of the knowledge or information in February 2015? So it was February 2015, March 2015, April 2015, up to June the 10th, because that is a kind of particular gap that we are prepared to allow as a special gap, but not a gap that exonerates or not a gap that constitutes any ground for the exoneration of liabilities, responsibilities, and duties owed to these children by Tower Hamlets Council. It's just an administrative gap in terms of the branding of the holder or holders of power, executive powers in Tower Hamlets Council at that time, in those March and April, let's say, and May, 3 months. Whatever the months, whatever the length of that particular period, did not constitute evidence or ground for Tower Hamlets Council to be exempt from the duties, legal duties, safeguarding duties as owed to these children. That is an administrative kind of description, not a legal excuse or not a ground for legally claiming exemption from duties that the Townless Council and its mayor or executive decision-making head had owed to these children. And then on the 11th of June 2015, there was this appearance of a new incumbent, John Biggs, in the post of elected mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets, in the name of Tower Hamlets. So June 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, up to the date when Sajid Javid removed the citizenship by birth from Shamima Begum. What did John Biggs do to safeguard this child up to that date? What did he do to safeguard the other two girls for as long as they were alive, or for as long as they were known to be alive? So these questions we are putting in very clear detail so that anyone watching this can know that we are not gossiping, we are not making up any tale or stories. We are not talking about obscurity or obscure subjects. These decisions will be used as examples and as basis to deny other people's the basic fundamental human rights and legal rights as well. So these issues are very much today's issues. Doesn't matter whether the Supreme Court, by the time the Supreme Court rubber stamped the Home Office's so-called appeal against Shamima Begum's successful kind of ruling as given by the Court of Appeal, it doesn't matter whether this particular rubber stamping took place when Shamima Begum was no longer a child. There are two things in here. One is that she is a child who has been discriminated against by the Home Office and by the Supreme Court as directly resulting from the events connected with the period when they were children, when they were not given the support that they could have used to avoid this kind of scenarios. So that's the very serious aspect of the failure, negligence by Tower Hamlets Council. And Tower Hamlets Council's personnel in the department that is funded to safeguard children, safeguard people, has to be investigated, not in the routine way of investigation, but we are talking about truthfully fact-finding, fact-checking, disclosure-based investigation. On the question of disclosure, Tower Hamlets Council employs a number of people who are called the legal section, which is fronted by a thing called the monitoring officer. That section, so-called legal section, is a festering criminality. All the personnel in there are in post to perpetrate lies. That is the main purpose. It's not written in the contract, of course. Their contracts are not kind of contracts that have the legal agenda of illegality, the agenda of illegality. But the record of these criminals in action show that they are criminals disguised as licensed law traders. And whoever was in post in the legal section, remember we are using the word legal within quotation marks, because we don't accept them as objectively definable as legal. But we are using the term legal for reference so that people can get easy access to the terminology that we are using and is involved. I mean, I have dealt with harmless counsels, criminals, in posts as legal staff for a very long time. And I have yet to come across, and I'm thinking as I'm speaking, I have yet to come across any single member of the legal staff in there that is legal, that is honest, and what is more shocking or equally shocking is actually aware of the legal kind of contents of the various obligations, duties, etc., etc. In other words, you have to know more about the criminals, about the crimes and the range of their criminality than the criminals themselves, in order to know what crimes they commit and how they commit the crimes. Now, logically, and in the context of basic administration, when these children were known to have crossed into international territories out of the UK, Tolerance Council should have sprung into action to rescue these girls. It's like these 4 children from Tower Hamlets had been kidnapped. Would anyone in the council have ignored that if those girls were called, instead of being kind of en route to join ISIS or Daesh, if they were described as victims of kidnapping? Think about this. I've said this in at least 5 previous broadcasts. Think about this again. That is what has happened. So in order to understand the gravity of the wrongdoings by Tower Council, we need to understand all aspects of the implications and the effects of the kidnapping on the girls, on the lives of anyone who is currently alive as a member of their family, any parents. We are not in contact with any of them. What we are doing is independently campaigning by digging up and putting together all the evidence and all the legal aspects. And no solicitor, no barrister, so-called, and most certainly no court of law would ever do. We can say that nobody can do that as comprehensively as we can and we have been doing. In case anyone has missed the full commentaries, they can go back and look at what we're saying. And I mentioned this David Penick. Now, Penick has there is a video going around online. You can look up David and Penick, Panick. And there is a thing called QC after his name. So if you look up or check or search for David Penick, you will be able to find it eventually. And if you say David Penick and Shamima Begum, then it will be easier to locate the video. And I'm asserting that the contents of David Penick's presentation to the Supreme Court is not kind of adequate, rigorous, or competent. And I don't expect Penick to be any different than he has been. Penick is not the most capable licensed law trader, nor could he produce anything other than what he has produced, even if he were a very competent, skillful, knowledgeable, licensed law trading barrister, so-called, QC, so-called. Because Panic, like Frederick Forsyth, for example, does not respect the general background of Shamima Begum as a community like Bangladeshis or Tower Hamlets or East London. That is a defect and a flaw, serious flaw. In Panic as a licensed law trader who was supposedly appearing, supposedly for Shamima Begum in front of the corrupt Supreme Court when it was in session, doing the kind of examining of or taking the representations on the appeal. The appeal again is an appeal against the ruling by the Court of Appeal, against the Home Office, saying that the Home Office was right to deny Shamima Begum its British citizenship. And the appellant was, of course, Shamima Begum against that one. And she had this ruling that in order to successfully and fairly is the one that is there, fair hearing, challenge the Home Office's removal of her citizenship, she needed to be in the UK in order to effectively mount the legal challenge against the Home Office. That bit, to effectively argue her case and mount the appeal against the Home Office, that is what she wants to do by being allowed to return to the UK for that purpose. In the main argument, she didn't say that she should be allowed to come back forever. That is an argument she can possibly make, but she didn't make that one in relation to that application to be given the permission to enter the UK to pursue the challenge to the Home Office's removing her British nationality by birth. I'm giving a very detailed kind of chapter and verse type of analysis in order for people who are not necessarily as familiar to be able to understand this. Now, you can go back and rewind the tape and you can see what I'm saying at every stage. And there may be some phrases and words that are repeated, but that repetition is for just clarity and emphasis. It's not a repetition in terms of the contents, because the contents are very simple. There have been several actions that mount to be legally kind of pursued, if you like, and examined. One was that the Home Secretary, when he removed the British nationality of Shamima Begum, he did that for national security. He didn't remove that by saying that Shamima Begum had done some crimes. As we said today, and as we have been saying right throughout these programs, Shamima Begum has not been accused of committing any crime. And as she has not been accused of committing any crime, she has not been arrested or subjected to the equivalent treatment of being arrested, let's say, over any crime. I'm just giving a legal summary. Nobody else has given this. I'm giving it. And I shall continue to supersede the quality and the standard of the description, supersede all the others that have been on the record, like including David Panic and any number of so-called licensed law traders. that have made any appearances in the name of Shamima Begum or about Shamima Begum or about her school friends at any stage. Of course, the case or cases of Shamima Begum are numerous compared to the equivalent numbers attaching to the rights of and behavior of her school friends concerned meaning the ones that are identified, not concerned in the sense of being anxious, because many people are anxious. Many more people are anxious about the treatment of these girls that have suffered these for the last calendar years, than are able to speak out. So we are doing all of that as well, because by implication, we are speaking for all the silent people that for various reasons are not able to speak out. But our basis for campaigning for justice for Shamima Begum and these three other girls remains universally valid. And what we are saying is the Towners Council is the starting point where the campaign actually is being addressed, if you like. Of course, we are doing that addressing by taking into account all the unfolding other things, including the various news reports that contain apparent statements about or by Shamima Begum that were not known before. We refer to the film that is either has been shown or is likely to be shown not very far into the distant future. The film documentary that has been edited by a woman who has been described as a Spanish person. Whether she has done that from Spain or whether she has done that in North America is not material. The point is that she has been obviously in contact with Shamima Begum, either directly or indirectly, whatever. Those details will be known later. But essentially, our campaign is asking the question as to what Tower Hamlets Council did. We are asking this question not because we don't know the answer. We know the answer. But we know the answer based on the contextual study of the evidence of the Tower Hamlets Council behavior. We want the Tower Hamlets Council to make public statements concerning every assertion we are making and to agree or disagree with us. As I have said, individuals who are campaigning currently or allegedly campaigning to have the mayor system scrapped, ironically, are also supporting the line that John Biggs is peddling, that he has shown sympathy towards Shamima Begum. Let me say this again. This is a lie. This is an absolute lie, and John Biggs is a proven liar on the records. John Biggs is a pathetic racist and an ignorant liar. He doesn't know that his lying craft is very transparently visible. When he says things like, I have been told that I have this capacity. Look at that style, look at that corrupt approach. He has been told by somebody else about him. He doesn't say, I say this or I think this. He says, I've been told. And this idiot says the same thing to either directly in person or by letter. He said the same thing to Richard Morey's inquiry. He says, somebody else says that about me. I mean, how devious can a person get? When I spoke to Biggs on film, because I did film for the record, I filmed him on the 22nd of June, I think, 2016. Was it 2016? Maybe 2015. I did film him, and I'll find the actual date on the film, which has been online anyway. Biggs says to me, I filmed him in the kind of vicinity of Whitechapel Road. And I asked him about the agenda, not the actual Crossrail, but the agenda behind the Crossrail plot against the East End of London. And I asked him about the threat to the future of the East End of London as posed by the Crossrail plot and the agenda behind the Crossrail plot, yeah? And I filmed him, as I said, I'm just looking for it, in the vicinity of Whitechapel Road. And I asked his opinion, I asked him what he was doing about defending the community against the City of London and big business agenda. And what did Big say? I'm just looking for that particular video that I filmed and broadcast online. So I shall look for it again and I shall find it. It is definitely somewhere online. So I said to him, I asked him what he was doing or what he was thinking to defend the community or help defend the community, because defending the community is my job or my record. He is a parasite, so he feeds off the defense work that I do, and he gets a career as a result of that, or as resulting from my work, as many parasites have done and do and are doing. So I asked him what he was doing to defend the community in the East End of London against the big business agenda of attacking the East End of London, as exemplified or evident in the attack plot by the Crossrail hole. So he should have answered, I'm doing this, or I've been doing this, or I think this should be done. He didn't say any of those things. He said 20 years ago or some years previously, he had bought a book about the East End of London. Now, what does it say? A book doesn't mean it says anything of substance. But look at the style, the book. I mean, the idea, the image of a book suggests that he is a person who reads books. He doesn't have any contents as to what he did or didn't do, or what he thought or didn't think. Now, the book he was referring to was a sham. It wasn't a real book. It was a pretense book put together by a thing at the time called Spitalfields Housing, whatever, Shapers. And the man involved with the book was somebody called Charlie, a man called Charlie, whose father had been a television executive. And the contents of the book were artificial, false, and could not be realized and could not be related to the actual community. Just like the contents of the BBC's King of the Ghetto and the book or books, or the claims on which that stupid assault on the Bangladeshis in Brick Lane area had been based. One of the criminal liars, Darkus, Dirty Howe, and Freak Dombey, and assorted other liars had temporarily claimed to have arrived in the East End of London to salvage the Bangladeshis that were plagued by homelessness and all the rest of it. Absolute pack of lies. Whatever they did not amount to mobilizing the community even to the degree of 1%, and they didn't relate to any campaign in the community. These aliens had descended on the East End on a fantasy plot, and we shall update on that again in due course. Essentially, the Spitalfields housing contraption was operated by a couple of white pretend experts and activists who have disappeared since their careerist stunt ended. One of them is now employed in Hackney Council, and I asked him a question. He contemptuously, contemptibly, racistly, typically remained silent. I invited him to come to a seminar I had held in Commercial Street about the future of the East End of London. And this racist refused to come. He had contemptuously stayed silent, didn't even acknowledge the emails. So John Biggs said that he had bought a book of lies, whatever, fantasy. He didn't answer what he was doing. Then I sent him emails, and I sent about 5 or 6, at least, separate emails to John Biggs, updating my queries, elaborating on what had been done, and so on. And Biggs would not commit himself with any coherent, principled commitment to defend the community. So this is the man who has been in post as mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets population, Tower Hamlets community, Tower Hamlets electors. And he has been in post serially since 11th of June 2015, when he got slotted in the first time, and then from the 3rd of May 2018. And in that time, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, the 6 calendar years. Over 6 calendar years, John Biggs has been in post. And for most of that time, these children have been children. These 4 schoolgirls from Tower Hamlets have been children. They're only adults for 2.5 years, let's say, at the most. However, many of them are alive, definitely alive today. These girls were children and alive for many years. And there is no evidence anywhere, public or publicly accessible, that John Biggs has expressed independent, lawful, humanitarian, ethical concern for the welfare of these children. There is no evidence that any of the sittings of the council, during the years before the lockdown came in, the meetings were held with observers taking part in observing, that any of the meetings of the Tower Hamlets Council elected councillors held any discussions about the welfare of these 4 girls, or even recognized the existence of these 4 girls, let's say. And this is the truth that we are focusing on, that is to say, the council had duties to these girls throughout those years, and the duties have been ignored. by Townless Council. First by Luthuraman, who was incumbent in the post of mayor at the expense of the community, and since Luthuraman got kicked out, with the exception of 3 months, John Biggs has been in post since 11th of June 2015. That is the reality. So we shall be continuing this in the next part.